The lawyer's hands were shaking when he dropped the thick folder on my kitchen table. Lawyers do not shake. Not unless the truth inside that folder can blow up a whole family. 5 days earlier, I had buried a secret worth $40 million. A secret big enough to tear my bloodline in half. And now my father's brand new wife stood in the middle of my apartment with a smile that said she thought she had already won. Beside her was a slick lawyer in a dark suit, holding his briefcase like a weapon. She thought she was here to take everything. She had no idea my grandfather had been getting ready for this moment for over a year. She had no idea he had left me the one thing she could never charm, steal, or fake. Proof. And she had no idea she had picked the wrong woman to fight. My name is Nora Bennett. This is the story of how I protected my grandfather's life work from the woman who married my father for money. I flew in from Fort Bliss 2 days before the wedding, still carrying the kind of tired that does not come from travel. It comes from grief. My grandfather, Henry Bennett, had died 6 weeks earlier, and I still had not learned how to breathe in a world without him. But my father had called to remind me the wedding was still on. Life goes on, Nora, he had said, like that was comfort. I stood on the airport pavement with my duffel bag cutting into my shoulder and stared at my phone, wondering how a man could bury his own father and still send out wedding invitations for a woman he had known less than a year. Grandpa Henry raised me in every way that mattered. My mother left when I was 4. My father worked long hours chasing a construction business that never fully stood on its feet. So Grandpa packed my lunches. Grandpa sat in the bleachers at every school race. Grandpa fixed my bike when I crashed it and told me not to cry before I even hit the ground. The night before I left for basic training, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have more steel in you than anyone I know." When he got sick 2 years later, I used every bit of leave I could get. I flew home whenever the army gave me even a little space to breathe. I sat beside his hospital bed and read the newspaper to him because his eyes got too tired for the small words. My father came twice. I am not saying that to be mean. I am saying it because later, that truth mattered. 3 days after the funeral, before I had even packed away my dress uniform, Grandpa's attorney asked to see me alone. His name was Martin Hale. He was quiet, exact, and never wasted words. I sat across from him at his desk, still numb, expecting maybe a watch, or a letter, or one small thing to remember Grandpa by. Instead, Martin slid a heavy folder toward me and said my grandfather had left me everything. Not just some of it. Everything. $40 million. Stocks. Business shares in 2 companies I did not even know he owned. 3 properties. One of them was the lake house where I spent every summer of my childhood catching fireflies in jars and falling asleep to the sound of water hitting the dock. I gripped the chair so hard my fingers hurt. "Does my father know?" I asked. Martin slowly shook his head. "Your grandfather left clear instructions," Martin said. "He said you were to tell no one. Especially not your father. Not until you were sure the man he raised was still the man standing in front of you." He paused and looked right at me. "He used those exact words, Nora. He believed you would understand one day." I did not understand then. Not fully. But something cold moved through me anyway. Grandpa never said things for no reason. Every sentence of his had another meaning hidden underneath it. So I kept quiet. I flew back to San Antonio for the wedding, wore the pale blue dress Grandpa always said made my eyes look brighter, and sat in the second row while my father married a woman named Vanessa Cole. I will admit it. Vanessa was beautiful. Late 40s. Sharp face. Perfect hair. The kind of laugh that made every man in the room turn and look. She came into my father's life 8 months after Grandpa got sick, right when my father was lonely, scared, and ready to believe anything warm. At the wedding reception, Vanessa found me beside the gift table. She wrapped her polished fingers around my arm and smiled too wide. "Did your grandfather make sure the family was taken care of?" she asked. I told her I did not know the details. It was not even a full lie yet. But I watched her all night after that. I watched her the way you watch dark clouds rolling in over open land. She asked my father's business partner about how long probate usually took while she ate wedding cake. She cornered my aunt near the bar and asked if Grandpa had ever mentioned a will. She hugged me for pictures, pressed her cheek against mine, and whispered so softly only I could hear, "Family should never keep secrets from family, sweetheart." I smiled for the camera and said nothing. Some warnings do not come with sirens. They come with lipstick and a smile. I went back to base 3 days later and tried to tell myself the wedding was over and the secret could stay buried. Maybe Grandpa had just been scared near the end. Maybe dying had made him suspicious. Maybe Vanessa's questions were just nerves from being the new wife. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But keeping Grandpa's secret felt like holding live wire in my chest. 5 days later, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 hard, sure knocks. I opened it and found Vanessa on my welcome mat in a cream blazer, smiling like she had every right to be there. Next to her stood a man I had never seen before, carrying a leather briefcase tight against his side. Vanessa did not wait to be invited in. She brushed past me like my apartment was already hers, heels tapping across the floor, eyes moving over my home in a way that felt less like looking and more like measuring. The man introduced himself as Victor Lane, an attorney. Just that. Not her attorney. Not our attorney. Just attorney. Floating there like smoke. Vanessa sat on my couch without asking and crossed her legs. "This will only take a few minutes," she said. "Victor just wants to clear up a few things." I stayed standing. Some old instinct in me, sharpened by years in uniform, told me sitting down would mean giving ground. Victor opened his briefcase and slid papers onto my coffee table. Texas inheritance laws. Yellow highlights. Blue circles. A whole trap dressed to look official. He started talking in that smooth, prepared voice some men use when they think the room already belongs to them. He said that as my grandfather's only living son, my father had certain rights. He used the word fairness over and over, like repeating it could make it true. Vanessa leaned forward and softened her face. "Your father is grieving too, Nora. Don't you think you should help make this right?" I let the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable. Grandpa had taught me that trick. Then I said, "I don't know what you want me to make right. I wasn't left anything." Vanessa's smile twitched. "Just a little, but I saw it." "That's not what we've heard," she said. "From who?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Victor cut in. "If there's nothing to hide, then you should have no problem signing this affidavit saying you received no inheritance from your grandfather." There it was. The real reason they came. The paper sat on my table like a snake in sunlight. If I signed it, I would be lying under oath. If I refused, I would tell them they were right to hunt me. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. "If you have questions about my grandfather's estate, ask Martin Hale. I'm sure you already know who he is, since you've clearly done your homework." Something hard flashed under Vanessa's makeup before she covered it again. Victor snapped his briefcase shut. Soft. Neat. Final. Vanessa stood and smoothed the front of her blazer. At the door, she turned back and looked at me with an expression I would remember for a long time. It was half warning, half insult. "Your grandfather always liked keeping his cards close," she said. "Looks like that runs in the family." I held the door until both of them were gone. Then I stood in my living room and listened to my heart slam against my ribs. The second the hallway went quiet, I called Martin. He picked up on the second ring. I told him every word they said. When I finished, he went silent in a way that made my stomach drop. "Nora," he said at last, "I need you to stay calm while I tell you something. 2 days ago, someone called my office pretending to be a paralegal doing routine estate verification. They asked very detailed questions about your grandfather's will. My assistant almost gave them information before I took the call myself." My mouth went dry. It wasn't a real paralegal? I asked. No, Martin said. There is no law office by that name in this state. Whoever called knew exactly what to ask. This wasn't a guess. This was planned. I thought about Vanessa at the wedding, asking careful little questions between smiles and hugs. Then I remembered the security camera above my apartment door, the one Grandpa had made me install after break-ins hit the building 2 years earlier. That night I pulled up the footage on my laptop and watched the visit again. That was when I saw what I had missed in the moment. While Victor talked and pushed papers at me, Vanessa lifted her phone twice. Once toward my bookshelf. Once toward the framed photo of me and Grandpa at the lake house. Once toward the corner of my desk, where my mail sat in a small wooden tray. She had not come to visit. She had come to collect. She was building a file on me right in my own home. The days after that moved fast. Too fast. My father started calling within 2 days. At first I let the calls go to voicemail. I needed time to figure out which version of him I was about to hear. When I finally answered, he skipped hello. We need to talk about the estate, he said. His voice sounded tight, like a rope pulled too far. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Don't do this, he snapped. Vanessa says you're hiding something from me. She says Dad left you money and you're keeping it secret. I stood in the hallway outside the mess hall and shut my eyes. Vanessa says a lot of things, I said carefully. Have you asked yourself why she cares so much? He answered without thinking. She's my wife, Nora. She's looking out for our family. Our family. 2 months into a marriage, and that woman was already wearing my family's name and speaking through my father's mouth. The calls kept coming. Then came the texts. Shorter. Colder. We need an answer. Vanessa thinks you should meet with her lawyer. This is tearing the family apart. I stared at that last one for a long time. The family was being torn apart, yes. But not by me. A few days later, things got worse. My bank sent me a security alert saying someone had tried to verify my identity over customer service. They had almost enough information to get through. Almost. My old address. My birthday, but 2 numbers were wrong. The bank denied it, but the message sat in my stomach like a rock. Then Martin called again. His voice was tighter than I had ever heard it. Someone sent my office a power of attorney paper, he said. It claimed you had signed permission for estate information to be released to a third party. I stood up so fast my chair hit the wall. I never signed that. I know, Martin said. The signature was fake. Badly fake. But someone tried. That was the moment I stopped thinking of Vanessa as a pushy stepmother asking rude questions. This was not grief. This was not family drama. This was a campaign. Slow. Careful. Patient. She was trying to pry open a locked door Grandpa had closed on purpose. So I did what soldiers do when the danger is there but the full map is not. I gathered information. I called my cousin Mia. She worked in records management and had a gift for finding things people thought were buried. I asked her to look into Vanessa Cole's past. What Mia found over the next few days made my skin crawl. Vanessa had been married twice before my father. The first marriage was to a man named Thomas Harper in Ohio, a man who owned a small chain of auto parts stores. They were married 4 years. The divorce papers claimed money had gone missing from the business. By the time the marriage ended, Thomas had sold 2 of his 3 stores. Her second marriage was 5 years later, in Arizona, to a retired dentist named Edward Salazar. He was older than her. Comfortable. Safe. The marriage lasted not even 3 years. The divorce papers showed Edward had filed a civil suit accusing Vanessa of trying to have him declared mentally unfit so she could gain control of his money. The case was settled quietly. Too quietly. I sat at my kitchen table with the printouts spread around me like battle maps and felt the shape of something ugly become clear. 2 older men. 2 marriages. 2 endings. Both poorer than before. Vanessa always walking away before the full truth could hit open court. This was not bad luck. This was a pattern. I thought of her eyes moving over my apartment. My pictures. My mail. My life. She had not been getting to know her new family. She had been studying a target. That night I called Martin again. I need everything Grandpa left behind, I said. Every note. Every paper. Anything he gave you that I haven't seen. I think he knew this was coming. Martin was quiet for a long moment. There's a box, he finally said. Your grandfather told me to keep it locked up and only give it to you if things ever started to look the way he feared. My heart pounded. I think it's time, he said. The next afternoon I sat in Martin's office while he set a wooden box on his desk. Brass hinges. Small keyhole. It looked like it belonged in an attic, not in a law office. Your grandfather brought this to me 8 months before he died, Martin said, sliding the key across the desk. He told me to hand it to you only if things started going bad. My fingers were not fully steady when I unlocked it. Inside was a leather journal, a bundle of handwritten letters tied with string, a thick manila envelope, and a flash drive taped under the lid. The journal was the first thing I opened. Grandpa's handwriting slanted across every page. The same handwriting that used to write my name on lunch notes and birthday cards when I was little. The first entries were from almost a year and a half earlier, not long after my father first said Vanessa's name at Sunday dinner. One line hit me hard. She asks questions like someone who already knows the answers. Another entry said, she does not study people. She studies weakness. Grandpa wrote about how Vanessa seemed to know exactly how much a man was worth within only a few talks. He said it reminded him of men who circle a failing business. Not because they love building, but because they smell collapse. Then the journal got more direct. Grandpa had hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Daniel Cruz, to quietly dig into Vanessa's past almost a year before my father proposed to her. The manila envelope held Daniel Cruz's full report. Court files from both marriages. Financial records showing each husband's money shrinking during the years Vanessa was with him. Photos with dates and times stamped on them. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Several pictures showed Vanessa meeting privately with Victor Lane months before she had ever gone to a Bennett family dinner. Victor. The same attorney who had sat on my couch pretending he was just helping clear up confusion. My head started to spin. Then I opened the flash drive. It held one video. When I pressed play, my grandfather filled the screen. He looked thinner than I remembered from his last months, but his eyes were still strong. Still sharp. Still him. Nora, he said softly, if you're watching this, then Vanessa has already started. I stopped breathing for a second. Even from a screen, he looked like he already knew I would need his strength. I wish I could tell you I was wrong about her, Grandpa said. I wish your father had found someone who loved him for the right reasons. But I've lived too long to mistake hunger for love. He looked down for a moment, then back up. I had Daniel follow her. I kept records. Every man before your father. Every dollar that vanished. Every court fight that got quiet before too many people could ask questions. I even recorded talks I probably should not have recorded, because suspicion is never enough when family is at risk. Proof matters. My chest hurt hearing him talk like that, hearing how far he had gone alone while he was dying. Then he said the part that broke me open. I left everything to you because you are the only one who never asked what I was worth. You sat with me in that hospital room because you loved me, not because you were counting down the days until I was gone. He went on. She will try to turn your father against you. She will make you look selfish. Greedy. Cold. She has done it before. It is not messy. It is a method. I need you to protect what I built. Not just for you. For your father too, even if he does not know he needs protecting yet. Then his voice softened. Do not use this out of anger, sweetheart. Use it because it's true. Use it when it matters. The screen went black. I sat there in Martin's office and stared at my own reflection in the dark laptop screen. Grandpa had not only left me money. He had built a shield. A full case. Piece by piece. Like the houses he used to build. Quietly. Carefully. Strong enough to survive a storm. I packed everything back into the box and locked it again. Whatever Vanessa thought she was walking into, she had no clue Grandpa had already seen every move before she made it. 9 days later, the lawsuit came. A process server handed it to me outside the base gym while my hair was still wet and my gym bag hung off one shoulder. I looked at the first page and saw the title, Vanessa Bennett vs. Nora Bennett. She had already taken my father's last name and was using it like armor. The lawsuit claimed I had hidden a family inheritance from my father and broken some made-up duty to tell him everything. It asked the court to force me to reveal my grandfather's full estate and give my father what Vanessa called a fair share. I read every page standing in the parking lot, and strangely, I did not feel panic. I felt calm. The calm that comes right before a training drill you have already run 100 times in your head. Martin met me that evening. He read the lawsuit line by line and said, "This is weak law. She has no real legal right here. But that's not her real goal." "She wants discovery," I said. Martin nodded. "Exactly. She wants a judge to force your financial records open under oath. She wants the court to get her what fake signatures and fake phone calls could not." The mediation hearing was set for the next month. In the weeks before it, my father called more than he had in years. Sometimes twice a day. His voice swung from begging to blaming depending on the hour. One night he said, "You are humiliating this family. Vanessa says you're treating her like a criminal." I answered, "She hired Victor Lane to make a fake power of attorney with my forged signature." "Did she tell you that? Did she tell you she was meeting him before she ever met you?" There was a long silence. So long I thought the line had dropped. "You don't know what you're talking about," he finally said, but his voice had gone thin. Unsteady. Like a man repeating something he no longer fully believed. I did not push. Grandpa had warned me. Truth needed timing. The mediation room was small and too bright, with cold lights that made everyone look tired. Vanessa came in wearing a gray suit with her hair pulled back tight. Victor was beside her with the same leather briefcase he had brought into my apartment. My father sat next to her, not next to me, and even though I expected it, that still hit hard. The mediator was a retired judge named Elena Brooks. She asked Vanessa's side to speak first. Victor stood and gave the same speech he had given me before, only dressed in fancier words. Fairness. Family duty. Shared grief. It sounded polished. It also sounded empty. Then it was our turn. Martin did not raise his voice. He never needed to. He opened his folder and started laying papers on the table one by one. First came the recordings Daniel Cruz had gathered. In one of them, Vanessa sat in a diner months before meeting my father and talked with Victor about how to approach a man whose adult daughter probably has money coming because the grandfather is sick. I watched my father's face while the recording played. I saw something crack behind his eyes. Then Martin laid down the court papers from Ohio and Arizona. The first husband. The second husband. The missing money. The claim that Vanessa had tried to get Edward declared mentally unfit so she could control his finances. Judge Brooks read every page slowly, making notes as she went. Then came the fake power of attorney paper beside a handwriting report proving the signature was not mine. Then came the phone records showing calls from Victor's office to my bank the same day someone tried to verify my identity using a wrong birth date. Vanessa's smile started to die right there in the room. She leaned toward Victor and whispered something. He barely shook his head. Just once. The tiny move of a lawyer who knows the hand on the table is worse than he thought. We still never said how much the inheritance actually was. Not the money. Not the properties. Not the business shares. We let the pattern speak. Judge Brooks finally put down her pen and looked straight at Vanessa. "Mrs. Bennet," she said, calm but heavy, "this was presented as a family fairness matter. What I am looking at appears to be something very different." Vanessa's jaw tightened. My father stared at the table. For the first time since the wedding, I saw doubt bloom on his face. Small. Painful. Real. The hearing stopped for the day so the judge could review everything more carefully, and the silence afterward was heavier than shouting. Vanessa grabbed her things fast and left with Victor. My father stayed behind. In the hallway, under the ugly court lights, he looked older than he had at Grandpa's funeral. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just us?" We sat in an empty conference room with a table too big for two people. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You owe me an explanation. You owe me the truth about what Dad left you." I looked at him and felt something tired rise in my chest. "I don't owe you anything," I said softly. "But I'll ask you something. When Grandpa was in the hospital those last 8 months, where were you?" He blinked like the question had slapped him. "I was working," he said. "You know how busy the business gets." "You visited twice," I said. I counted. I was there almost every week. I took him to appointments. I sat through chemo. I read him the paper because his eyes were too tired for the small print. "Where were you?" He opened his mouth, then shut it again. "I was grieving in my own way," he finally said, but even he sounded unconvinced. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope Martin had given me weeks earlier. Grandpa had written on the front, "For my son, if it comes to this." I slid it across the table. My father opened it with shaking hands. I watched his eyes move across Grandpa's writing. Watched his jaw tighten, then loosen, then tighten again. He read every word slowly, as if each line hurt. The letter said, "Son, if you are reading this, then the woman you married has done exactly what I feared she would do. I do not write this in anger. I write it in sadness. I watched you become so hungry for comfort after your mother left that you stopped asking hard questions about the people who offered it. I left everything to Nora not because I do not love you, but because money should never be handed over only because of blood. It should go to the person who showed up. The one who sat beside me and asked for nothing. You know who that person is. You have always known. This money is not a prize. It is a responsibility. I gave it to the one person I trust to carry it honestly. Protecting Nora from Vanessa is not a betrayal of you. It is the last gift I have left to give either of you." When my father finished, his hands were trembling so hard the paper shook. "I didn't know," he whispered. His eyes were red. Wet. Lost. "I didn't know he saw all of this." "He saw it before either of us," I said. "That's what love looks like sometimes. Not blind trust. Clear eyes." He stared at the letter for a long time. Then he asked the smallest question I had ever heard from him. "What happens now?" I stood and gathered my things. "Now you decide," I said. "You decide if you keep believing her, or if you are finally ready to see what the rest of us already see." I left him there with Grandpa's letter open in front of him like a mirror he had spent months refusing to face. 3 weeks later came the final hearing. By then something in my father had changed. He called the week before and asked if he could speak in court. "Not for Vanessa," he said quietly. "For the truth." I did not know if I was ready to trust that. But I was ready to hear it. I walked into court that morning in my dress uniform. Not because I needed to impress anyone. Because Grandpa had always been proudest of the part of me that showed up and did hard things. Martin sat beside me. His folder was thinner now. Most of what mattered was already in the record. Vanessa came in without Victor. A younger lawyer from his firm sat next to her instead. He looked nervous, like a man who had inherited a fire already out of control. Judge Brooke spoke plainly. She said the evidence showed a pattern of fraud, forgery, and attempted deception. She said there was no legal reason to force me to reveal or divide my grandfather's estate. Vanessa's case was dismissed completely. Then the judge's voice got harder. She said the evidence suggesting forgery and possible identity theft would be sent to the proper authorities for investigation. Vanessa's young lawyer stood up almost at once and asked to withdraw from the case. He said there were conflicts he could not ignore. Vanessa just sat there. Still. Small. For the first time, not powerful at all. Then my father stood up. "I want to speak," he said. The judge allowed it. He buttoned his jacket slowly, then looked at the court, then at me. "My daughter never asked me or anyone in this family for anything," he said. His voice shook, but he did not stop. Not money. Not praise. Nothing. She showed up for my father when I did not. And I let someone twist my guilt until I aimed it at the wrong person. I made my daughter into the villain because it was easier than facing my own failure. He turned to me fully then. "I'm sorry, Nora. I should have said that long before we got here." I did not answer right away. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Because some apologies need room to stand on their own before they are touched by forgiveness. Judge Brooks nodded, wished the family healing, and ended the hearing. Outside on the courthouse steps, my father caught up to me before I reached my car. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Not pretend this never happened. Just start from where we really are." I looked at him for a long moment. "We can try," I said. And I meant it. In the months after that, Vanessa slipped out of our lives almost like smoke. The investigation into the forged papers moved quietly in the background. Martin told me people whose job it was to handle things like that were now handling it. My father filed for divorce within weeks. He grieved that ending in his own way, but after the fog cleared, I saw something in him I had not seen in years. Clarity. Like a man waking up and realizing how long he had been lost. I did not take revenge the way Vanessa probably expected. I did not go on television. I did not drag her name through the dirt. I did not turn bitterness into my new personality. Grandpa had not left me $40 million so I could become cruel. He had left it to me so I could build something better with clean hands. So I did. I used part of the money to start a scholarship for children of active duty service members, the kind of help I wished more military kids had when I was younger. I restored the lake house too. I kept the worn wood floors. I kept the mismatched chairs on the porch. I kept the smell of cedar and old summers in every room. I stayed in the army because some parts of me were never for sale, not for any price. My father and I are still rebuilding, slowly and carefully, the way you rebuild anything that was cracked but not fully destroyed. He comes to the lake house now sometimes. Last month we stood on the dock at sunset, the same place where Grandpa once taught me how to hold a fishing line steady, and my father said, "I finally understand what he meant. An inheritance isn't a reward. It's a responsibility." I looked out over the water and thought about how long it had taken us to get there. Not to perfect peace. Not to easy answers. Just to honesty. And sometimes, after everything, honesty is the closest thing a broken family gets to grace. A few weeks after the case closed, I went to Grandpa's grave with a bundle of white lilies, the same kind he used to grow along the fence at the lake house. I stood there while the wind moved softly through the trees and spoke to him the way I used to speak to him in the hospital when he was too tired to answer much. "Your secret stayed safe, Grandpa," I told him. "And so did your legacy." Then I touched the cool stone one time and smiled through tears that did not feel weak anymore. They felt earned. I walked back to my car carrying more than money, more than property, more than the life he had built. I carried his final lesson. Show up. See clearly. protect what matters. And when the truth finally comes, do not be afraid to stand in it. If this story touched you, tell me which part hit your heart the hardest. And if you love stories like this, stay with us here on Twisted Family Revenge Stories, because some family secrets do not stay buried forever.